The galaxy had seen many wars, but this one threatened to burn entire star systems. The Zarathi Empire, proud and old, was preparing its fleets. Earth, young but growing strong, had drawn the Empire's attention. Skirmishes had already begun in the outer colonies. Both sides knew the next step could mean total destruction. And then came the proposal, not of surrender, not of treaties written on cold paper, but of a marriage, a political binding that might stop the bleeding before it became endless war. Princess Lysera of the Zarathi was chosen. She was tall, fierce, and carried the sharp features of her people. Her golden eyes glowed faintly, like fire trapped in crystal. She was known for her pride, her unshakable will, and her sharp tongue. To the Zarathi, she was the perfect shield for their honor. If peace had to come, it would come with her as the symbol. Her husband would be Commander David Hale of Earth. He was not born into royal blood, nor did he carry any special titles. He was a soldier, decorated for his leadership during border clashes. The Human Council trusted him to stand firm where others might bend. More importantly, they trusted that he would not shame Earth in front of the Empire. Their marriage was not of love, nor choice. It was strategy. It was survival. The wedding took place aboard a neutral station, watched by diplomats, admirals, and spies from dozens of worlds. The chamber was filled with silence as the two stood together side by side. Lysera wore ceremonial armor, polished to a mirror shine, her people's crest engraved across her chest plate. David wore Earth's dress uniform, a dark navy coat lined with silver. His face was calm, his eyes steady, though inside he carried a storm. When the vows were spoken, they felt more like chains than promises. Lysera's voice was sharp and cold as steel. David's was steady, controlled, but without warmth. Applause followed. To the galaxy, it was a victory. To them, it was a cage. That night, the news spread across worlds. Peace at last. The Human Zarathi Union. A marriage to end wars. But behind the headlines, two strangers stood in silence, bound together by politics, not affection. Lysera had been raised to despise weakness. To her, humans were fragile, their bodies soft, their lifespans short. They fought with technology, not spirit. Her people told stories of humans failing in the harsh trials that Zarathi warriors survived with ease. So when she looked at her new husband, she saw a symbol of compromise, not strength. "I will not be tamed," she told him in private, her voice like a blade. "This marriage may bind our names, but it does not bind my loyalty." David only nodded. He had expected this. "I didn't ask for loyalty," he replied. "Only respect. And maybe one day trust." His calmness unsettled her. She had expected him to argue, to try to command her, to show weakness through anger. Instead, he stood like a stone wall, firm, unshaken, not seeking her approval. Was the first moment she realized humans were not exactly what she thought. The days that followed were filled with awkward ceremonies and forced appearances. They sat together at councils, their expressions carefully composed for the cameras. In public, they looked like unity. In private, silence and distance hung heavy. The human habitat ship, Aurora's Spear, became their home. It was far smaller than the palaces Lysera had known. There were no golden halls, no towering statues of ancestors. Instead, the ship was built for function. Clean corridors, modest chambers, and a command deck that never slept. At first, Lysera felt insulted. To her, this was unworthy of a princess. But slowly, she began to notice the little details, the way the crew greeted each other like family, the way the ship worked with efficiency, not grandeur. There was no waste, no arrogance. Everything had purpose, and David fit into it perfectly. He spoke to his crew not as a master, but as a leader, among equals. When he gave orders, it was not with pride, but with confidence. His people trusted him deeply, and that trust gave him power. Lysera could not deny that power, even as she tried to ignore it. At one formal dinner, tensions almost boiled over. The counselors spoke of trade routes and military patrols. Lysera interrupted, her voice sharp. criticizing the human fleets as fragile escorts pretending to be warships. The room went silent. David did not raise his voice. He simply replied, "Fragile or not, they protect billions, and they haven't failed yet." The human officers nodded in respect. Lysera felt the sting of being outmatched, not by strength, but by words spoken with quiet conviction. She said nothing more that evening, but her golden eyes studied him carefully, as if she was seeing him for the first time. Still, she kept her vow. In her heart, she told herself she would never accept this human as her true partner. He might earn respect, perhaps, but never closeness, never love. That part of her remained locked away, guarded behind walls of pride. But sometimes, when the corridors were quiet and she caught him speaking softly to his crew, or when she saw the way he stood firm against the doubts of others, she felt a strange pull inside her chest, a pull she quickly buried. For now, she reminded herself, this was only politics, only survival. Yet deep within, something had begun to stir, something neither of them could see yet. The galaxy celebrated their marriage as the end of war, but for David and Lysera, it was the beginning of a different battle, a battle of hearts, of pride, of discovery, and it had only just begun. Life aboard the Aurora's spear was unlike anything Princess Lysera had ever known. The Zarathi palaces were grand, filled with crystal arches, glowing murals and warriors in shining armor. Every step reminded her of her people's glory. But here, in the human flagship, everything was plain. Narrow halls, dull walls, lights that flickered slightly, and the constant hum of engines filled the air. To her it felt less like a palace and more like a hive. Busy, noisy, practical. Humans hurried everywhere with datapads, uniforms wrinkled, boots echoing. They smiled at each other, shared jokes, and sometimes even laughed in the corridors. Lysera had never seen soldiers act so casually. Zarathi warriors marched in silence, proud and cold. These humans acted as if war was not hanging over their heads. At first, she despised it. But slowly she noticed something strange. Despite their laughter, despite their casual tone, these humans never failed in their duties. A mechanic who joked with a pilot still tightened every bolt perfectly. A guard who smiled at a passing officer still held his post with unshakable focus. Lysera realized that this casualness was not weakness. It was trust. Still, she would not admit this aloud. Not yet. Her husband, Commander David Hale, moved easily among his people. He spoke with officers, engineers, even cooks, treating all of them with respect. Lysera watched with sharp eyes. To her, rulers stood above their subjects, commanding through fear and duty. But David led differently. His crew looked at him with loyalty, not obligation. They obeyed him not because they had to, but because they wanted to. One evening, Lysera confronted him in their private quarters. "Your people treat you like a friend, not a leader," she said coldly. "Do you not fear they will forget their place?" David looked up from the reports he was reading. His voice was calm, steady as always. "I don't want them to fear me. I want them to trust me. Fear breaks in time. Trust holds." Lysera frowned, her golden eyes narrowing. His words sounded simple, but deep inside, she knew they carried weight. Zarathi leaders demanded obedience. Humans earned it. It unsettled her. The cultural clash showed itself most at meals. On Zarathi ships, food was ritual. Warriors ate in silence, consuming high-energy rations carefully prepared to fuel strength. But on the Aurora's spear, the mess hall rang with noise. Humans laughed, shouted across tables, shared stories as they ate. Lysera found it chaotic and undisciplined. She sat stiffly beside David during one such meal. A young pilot leaned across the table, grinning. "Princess, what do you think of our food?" She looked down at the plate. The meal was simple. Vegetables, protein strips, and bread. No spices, no elaborate preparation. To her, it tasted plain, almost insulting. She lifted her chin. "It is edible." The table fell silent for a moment. Then one officer coughed into his hand, hiding a laugh. Another smirked. Lysira's pride burned. She felt mocked. But David only smiled calmly. Don't take it personally, he told his crew. Zirathi, palaces probably serve meals fit for gods. Our food will seem poor by comparison. The officers chuckled softly and returned to eating, tension fading. Lysira studied him. He had defended her without bowing to her. He had protected her pride, while keeping his crew at ease. That balance surprised her. Still, she refused to soften. At council meetings, she often clashed with him. One time, they discussed patrol routes near a contested sector. Lysira interrupted, her voice sharp. Your ship's spread too thin. You risk everything with this weak strategy. David leaned forward. Weak? It keeps trade safe and colonists alive. We cannot leave them exposed. You waste strength protecting fragile borders, Lysira pressed. A true empire strikes at the heart of its enemies. David met her gaze firmly. And while the empire strikes, who protects the farmers? The children? The traders who feed your fleets? Silence followed. The human officers nodded, some with quiet smiles. Lysira said nothing more, but inside her thoughts stirred. He had spoken with passion, not calculation, and he had reminded her of something she rarely thought of, ordinary lives. Zirathi rulers often ignored such people. Humans did not. That in our mind, though she told hers. The uneasy peace between the Zirathi Empire and Earth held, but only by a thin thread. In the far reaches of space, lawless groups hunted for weakness. Smugglers, raiders, and pirates had grown bold, testing the edges of both empires. One day, news reached the Aurora's Spear. A human trade convoy had been ambushed in a nearby sector. The attackers had destroyed 2 escort ships and taken hundreds of civilians hostage. The Human Council called for immediate rescue. Princess Lysira stood in the war room with David, the ship's officers, and holographic maps glowing around them. Her golden eyes flashed with anger. This is proof of what I said, she declared. Your fleets are spread too thin. Pirates would never dare challenge Zirathi warships in open space. David's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm. The Yai-Dor convoy was lightly armed. They weren't expecting such a strike. Lysira crossed her arms, her tone sharp. Then I will take command of this mission. My people know how to deal with such dishonor. The officers looked uneasy. The Zirathi princess commanding a human fleet? It was unheard of. But David's voice cut through the silence. No, I'll lead this operation. Lysira turned to him, eyes narrowing. You would deny me? This is my right as princess of the empire. This isn't about rights, David said firmly. It's about responsibility. Those are human lives out there. I'll bring them home. The two locked eyes, tension filling the room. Finally, Lysira spoke coldly. Then show me, Commander. Show me if humans truly know war. The Aurora's spear jumped into the contested sector hours later. Debris floated across the void, burned hulls, shattered cargo containers, drifting signals of distress. On the scanners, pirate vessels clustered around the surviving transports, their weapons aimed like knives at the helpless civilians. Shields up, David ordered calmly. Weapons on standby. Lysira stood beside him on the command deck, her arms folded. She whispered, You walk into a trap. They outnumber you 2 to 1. David didn't look at her. His voice was steady. Then we'll even the odds. The pirates sent a signal. Their leader appeared on the main screen, grinning with sharp teeth. Leave now, humans, or we scatter your civilians across the stars. David's reply was quiet, almost too calm. You won't harm them, because by the time you try, you'll already be dead. The pirate laughed, cutting the transmission. Weapons powered up. Dozens of enemy ships moved into attack formation. Commander? The tactical officer asked nervously. Orders? David's eyes narrowed. We cut straight through. The battle began in a storm of fire. The Aurora's spear surged forward, its cannons blazing. Instead of circling wide or holding defensive, David drove the ship straight at the enemy's heart. Are you insane? Lysira snapped. You expose your flank. Trust me, David answered, gripping the command rail. The ship shook under enemy fire, but its shields held. Then, at the last moment, David barked new orders. Hard roll! Release counter-drones! The Aurora's spear spun sharply, releasing small drones that scattered like sparks. The drones emitted false signals, confusing pirate sensors. Suddenly, the pirates' formation broke apart, their weapons firing at ghosts. David seized the moment. Target engines! Disable, don't destroy. We want the hostages alive. Precision strikes crippled 3 pirate ships instantly. Others, panicked, colliding with each other in the chaos. Within minutes, the field had turned. What looked like certain defeat now became a human advantage. Lysera's eyes widened. She had expected brute force, reckless sacrifice. But this was not recklessness. This was strategy, cleverness, boldness backed by discipline. For the first time, she whispered to herself, impressive. The battle raged on. At one point, a pirate vessel broke through, aiming directly for the hostage transport. Lysera's instincts flared. She reached for the comm. Divert fire, protect the civilians. But before she could finish, David gave the order. Full thrust, intercept. The Aurora's spear surged between the transport and the pirate vessel, taking the brunt of enemy fire. The shields flared bright, alarms ringing across the deck. Officers held their breath. Then with one devastating volley, the pirate ship was reduced to debris. The civilians were safe. Lysera turned toward David, stunned. He had not hesitated to put his own ship at risk for strangers. To a Zirathi, such an act would be called foolish. But watching him now, she realized it was not foolishness. It was courage, the kind that inspired loyalty beyond fear. Hours later, the battle was over. The pirates fled into the void, their fleet shattered. Human ships moved to recover the hostages. The Aurora's spear limped with scorched armor, but its crew cheered in triumph. Lysera stood silently at the viewport, watching rescue shuttles dock with the transports. David approached, his uniform scorched from the battle, his face tired but calm. You risked everything, she said quietly, for people not even bound to you by blood or honor. David's eyes met hers. They didn't need to be. They're human lives. That's enough. Lysera held his gaze. For the first time, there was no mockery in her eyes, only curiosity, and something else she refused to name. That night, the ship celebrated. Officers raised toasts, crews laughed and sang. Lysera sat apart observing. Humans rejoiced not as conquerors but as survivors. They honored the living, remembered the fallen, and promised to rebuild. And in the center of it all stood David, calm, steady, not basking in glory, but ensuring everyone else was safe first. Lysera's chest tightened. She had thought of humans as weak, fragile, short-lived. But tonight, she had seen strength in them, strength not of muscle or fear, but of spirit. When she returned to her quarters, she stood at the viewing window, her reflection mixing with the stars. She whispered softly, "Perhaps I was wrong." Her pride resisted the thought, but her heart carried it all the same. Peace never came easy. After the battle against the pirates, the galaxy praised the courage of Earth's fleet. But not everyone wanted the alliance between humans and the Zirathi Empire to grow strong. In the shadows, enemies whispered. Some were pirates, some were rival empires, and some were even within the Zirathi court itself. To them, the marriage between Princess Lysera and Commander David Hale was a threat. If humans and Zirathi truly stood united, no enemy could challenge them. So the only solution in their eyes was to break the bond before it could take root. The chance came during a diplomatic gathering. The hall aboard the Aurora's spear was decorated more richly than usual. Banners of Earth and Zirathi hung side by side. Diplomats from allied worlds walked among the crowd, glasses in hand, trading quiet words. Lysera stood tall in ceremonial dress, her golden eyes glowing with pride. Beside her was David, calm in his uniform, greeting guests with the same steady patience that had won his crew's loyalty. Outwardly, it was a celebration of unity. Inwardly, tension hung thick. Some smiled politely while hiding distrust. Lysera sensed it. She had grown up in a court of lies and schemes, and now her instincts told her something was wrong. As the speeches began, she shifted uneasily. Her hand brushed the hilt of the ornamental blade at her side, a gift from her people. She scanned the crowd, her sharp eyes narrowing. Then, without warning, a glint of metal flashed from the upper balcony. A shot rang out. Time seemed to slow. Lizara's eyes widened as she saw the weapon aimed directly at her heart. Before she could react, a figure moved in front of her. David. The blast struck him in the chest. The sound echoed through the hall as gasps filled the air. He stumbled, then fell to one knee, blood staining his uniform. David! Lysera's voice broke, through her pride sharp with panic. Guards rushed forward, chaos erupting. The assassin tried to fire again but was quickly tackled by security. Guests screamed. Diplomats ducked for cover. But Lysera saw none of it. She dropped to her knees beside her husband, her hands pressing against the wound. "You fool," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why would you do this?" David's eyes were heavy, but they met hers. His lips moved, voice weak. "Because you're my wife." Her heart clenched. She had expected arrogance, perhaps even a sense of duty. But instead, his answer was simple, human, honest. As medics rushed in, Lysera refused to move aside. She held his hand, her golden eyes blazing with a fury she had never felt before. "Save him," she ordered. "Do whatever it takes." Hours later, David lay in the medbay, pale but alive. The shot had been serious, but human doctors were skilled, and the Aurora's spear carried advanced medical units. Lysera never left his side. She sat by his bed, silent at first. Pride had always kept her words sharp, her emotions hidden. But now, looking at him lying there, she felt something breaking inside. She remembered his steady voice in the council room, his daring in battle, the way he had risked his life for strangers, and now, the way he had thrown himself between her and death without a thought. No Zarathi warrior had ever done that for her, not even those sworn to protect her. For the first time, she saw not weakness in humanity, but strength of a different kind. When his eyes opened hours later, her voice came out softer than she expected. "You're a fool, David Hale." He gave a faint smile. "So I've been told. You risked everything." "I'd do it again," he answered simply. Lysera looked at him, stunned into silence. She wanted to argue, to call him reckless, to claim she never needed protection, but the words would not come. Instead, she only whispered, "Why?" David's gaze was steady, even as exhaustion pulled at him. "Because I meant what I said, David recovered slowly, but he recovered. The medics said the wound would have killed most men, yet he pulled through with quiet strength. Even while resting, he continued giving orders, making sure the Aurora's spear stayed ready. Lysera stayed close through those weeks. At first she told herself it was duty. She could not be seen abandoning her husband after such an event. But deep inside she knew it was more than duty. When she saw him push through pain to meet his responsibilities, her chest tightened. When he gave small smiles to the crew, encouraging them even from his bed, she felt something stir inside her she had never felt before. The assassin's attack had shown her something no speech or treaty ever could. Her husband valued her life, more than his own, and that thought refused to leave her. One evening, weeks after the attack, David finally returned to his quarters. The ship was quiet, the crew giving him space. Lysera waited for him inside, standing near the viewing window as the stars drifted beyond. She wore no armor that night, only a simple gown of her people, dark silver with faint golden patterns. David entered, moving carefully, his uniform neat, but his body still healing. He stopped when he saw her. "You're here," he said, softly. She turned, her golden eyes meeting his. "Where else would I be?" For a long moment, silence hung between them, not the cold, sharp silence of old, but a new kind, gentle, almost fragile. Finally, Lysera spoke. "When we married, I swore I would never give my loyalty to a human. I thought you weak, fragile, unworthy. David didn't interrupt. He stood, still listening, his expression calm but serious. But then, she hesitated, her voice trembling just slightly. You risked your life for mine. You fought not for glory, but for people you didn't even know. And when I mocked you, you answered with patience, not anger. I don't understand it, David Hale. I don't understand how you can be so steady. David gave a faint smile. Maybe it's just what being human means. Lysera shook her head. No, it is more than that. It is who you are. She walked, closer, her step slow, deliberate. For the first time since their marriage, there was no wall of pride in her voice. Do you not hate me? For how I treated you? For the words I spoke? David's answer was simple. No. You did what you thought you had to. I only wanted to prove myself, not to your people, but to you. Her chest tightened. She had no answer for that. The silence stretched again, heavy, with things unspoken. Outside the window, the stars glimmered, silent witnesses. Finally, Lysera lowered her guard completely. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I do not know what this bond between us is meant to be, but I no longer wish to fight it. David stepped closer too, his voice gentle. Neither do I. For the first time, there was no distance, no coldness, only closeness. That night changed everything. For Lysera, it was the night her heart shifted. She had spent her life believing strength meant domination, control, and fear. But David showed her a different kind of strength, one built on trust, patience, and sacrifice. And she realized she no longer wanted to stand against him. She wanted to stand beside him. For David, it was the night his burden lightened. He had carried the marriage as a duty, a promise made for peace. But now it was more than politics. He had seen glimpses of the real Lysera, fierce, proud, but also capable of deep loyalty once her walls fell. And together, for the first time, they truly became husband and wife. The next morning, the change was visible to everyone. When Lysera entered the command deck, she no longer stood apart. She stood beside David, their shoulders nearly touching. When she spoke, it was not to mock, but to advise. When David gave orders, she added her strength, supporting him rather than challenging him. The crew noticed. Whispers spread quickly. The princess has softened. No, she's changed. Maybe this alliance is real after all. Even among the diplomats, the shift was clear. Where before they had doubted, now they saw hope. If the proud Zarathi princess and the steady human commander could find unity, then perhaps their people could too. Later that day, Lysera spoke to David privately. Do you realize what has happened? He raised an eyebrow. You mean us, she nodded. Yes, us. This bond. It will shake the galaxy. Our enemies will fear it. Our people will watch it closely. They will either see strength or they will see weakness. David leaned against the desk, his gaze steady. Then let's show them strength. Together. Lysera studied him, then slowly smiled. Not the cold, mocking smile she once wore, but a true smile, warm, rare, and bright. Together, she repeated. That evening, as the stars stretched before them, Lysera stood once again at the window. David joined her, his hand resting gently near hers. They did not speak for a long time. They didn't need to. The silence now carried peace, not distance. In her heart, Lysera knew something had changed forever. She no longer saw her husband as fragile. She no longer saw herself as trapped. Instead, she saw a partner, a man whose spirit matched her pride, whose strength balanced her own. And as for David, he no longer carried the marriage as a duty. It was no longer chains of politics, but a bond forged in fire, trust, and a single night where walls fell away. The galaxy outside remained dangerous. Enemies still plotted, wars still threatened. But whatever storms came, they would face them, side by side. Because one night had changed everything. The morning sun broke through the clouds of earth, painting the sky in orange and gold. A gentle wind moved across the fields near Daniel's small farmhouse. For the first time in many weeks, there was peace. The night had been long, filled with choices, fears, and confessions, but now a calm silence held the world. Elira stood by the window, watching the light spread across the land. Her tall figure, dressed in simple human clothes Daniel had given her, looked different now. There was no armor, no crown, no wall between her and him. She looked free, and yet her eyes carried the weight of what they had survived. Daniel entered the room quietly. He was carrying 2 cups of tea, the steam rising in the morning air. He placed 1 cup in her hands. She accepted it with a small smile, her fingers brushing against his. That simple touch meant more than all the grand words spoken between them. "You're quiet," Daniel said softly, sipping his tea. "I'm thinking," Elira replied, her voice calm. "Last night, everything changed. My path, my people, even my heart." She looked at him with steady eyes. "I was raised to believe my duty was to my empire, to rules written before I was born. But now I wonder if my duty is to something greater." Daniel tilted his head. "And what's that?" "To us," she said, her voice almost a whisper. The words settled between them like sunlight breaking through the cold. Daniel didn't need to answer. His silence, his steady gaze, told her enough. Later that day, Elira received a message through her communicator. A small glowing device carried the voices of her people across the stars. The message was brief but powerful. "Princess Elira," said the voice of her council leader, "we have received word of your decision. You did not return to the Empire. You did not lead our arranged union with the Vanar. Instead, you remain on Earth. Many are confused. Many are angry. But some call you brave." Elira closed her eyes, listening to the words. She had expected rejection, punishment, perhaps even war, but the voice continued. "There is unrest in the Empire. Old traditions are questioned. Your choice may bring conflict, but it may also bring hope. If you have truly chosen this human, then stand firm. Show us the path you believe in." The message ended, leaving silence behind. Daniel had heard it too. He stood in the doorway, his arms crossed. "So, what happens now?" Elira turned to him. Her silver eyes shone, not with fear, but with determination. "Now, I stand with you. No matter what storm comes." The following days were filled with change. News spread across the galaxy of the alien princess who had chosen to stay with a human. Some species laughed at the idea. Some whispered that humans were dangerous charmers, able to bend even royal will. Others, especially the younger generation of her people, felt inspired. Across cities of her empire, paintings of her with Daniel appeared. They were simple sketches at first, then banners carried by crowds. The people no longer saw her only as a princess tied to tradition. They saw her as someone who had chosen her own future. And Earth? For the humans, it was a mix of shock and celebration. Governments tried to understand what it meant. Scientists wanted to study her. Soldiers wanted to protect her. But Daniel kept her safe in his small farmhouse, far from noise and politics. To him, she was not a symbol or a trophy. She was simply Elira. One evening, when the stars came out, Elira sat on the porch beside Daniel. The night sky stretched, endless above them. She pointed toward a cluster of stars, her voice soft. "My home is there, far beyond those lights. For so long I thought happiness was only duty, that I was a piece on a board, moved by others. But sitting here with you, I feel alive for the first time." Daniel looked at her, then at the sky. "Funny thing is," he said with a chuckle, "I used to think my life would always be small. Just me, my farm, and the same stars above. Then one night a ship crashes and suddenly the universe changes." She leaned her head against his shoulder and for the first time, they both laughed together. It was not the laugh of royalty or soldiers, but of two souls who had found each other in the chaos of worlds, but peace never lasts forever. A new transmission came weeks later. It was not from her the rival species HFY